The hotel room door swung open, and my 8-year-old daughter squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. "Daddy," she shouted with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. My husband looked at us. Then all the color drained from his face. Before he could say a single word, a woman stepped into the doorway, wearing one of his shirts. Behind her, 2 half-packed suitcases sat beside a crib that definitely wasn't ours. My daughter looked up at me, confused, waiting for someone to explain why Daddy wasn't happy to see us. In that instant, every lie I'd trusted for 12 years collapsed. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31 years old. I live in Indianapolis with my husband, Daniel, and our 8-year-old daughter, Lily. For 12 years, I believed we had the kind of marriage people quietly admired. Daniel traveled to Chicago almost every other week for business meetings, and although I missed him, I never questioned his explanations. He always called every evening, remembered birthdays, and never forgot to tell Lily goodnight. She adored her father and counted the days until each trip ended. One Saturday morning, Lily burst into the kitchen carrying crayons and construction paper. "Mom," she whispered, "what if we surprise Daddy for his birthday?" I smiled, thinking she meant decorating the house. Instead, she grinned and said, "Let's fly to Chicago and surprise him at his hotel." The excitement in her eyes melted every practical objection I had. I worried about interrupting Daniel's work, but Lily insisted birthdays only happen once. She even drew a colorful card with 3 smiling stick figures holding balloons beneath the words, "Best Dad Ever." My heart softened. Secretly, I called Daniel's office, pretending I needed to send important documents. His assistant politely confirmed the hotel where he was staying. That tiny confirmation erased my remaining doubts. Before sunset, I had booked 2 airline tickets, wrapped Daniel's birthday gift, and promised Lily we would keep everything a secret. Watching her fall asleep hugging the handmade card, I honestly believed we were flying toward the happiest surprise our family had ever shared together. The week before our trip, little things kept happening that should have made me stop and think. Daniel had always left his phone on the kitchen counter without a second thought. Lately, though, it never left his hand. Even when he showered, he carried it into the bathroom. If a message appeared while we were watching television, he would casually flip the screen over before reading it. I noticed it, wondered about it for a moment, then reminded myself that stressful projects often came with confidential information. Trust was easier than suspicion. His business trips had also become slightly longer. What used to be 2-day meetings somehow stretched into 3 or 4 days, usually because of unexpected client dinners or delayed negotiations. Whenever I asked how everything went, his answers sounded rushed but believable. I never pressed for details because I wanted to be the supportive wife, not someone who questioned every schedule change. A few days before his birthday, I also discovered he had opened a separate business bank account. Daniel explained that his company wanted travel expenses handled independently for tax purposes. The explanation sounded reasonable enough, and I accepted it without another question. Meanwhile, Lily could hardly contain her excitement. During the flight to Chicago, she carefully colored the birthday card she had started at home, adding tiny airplanes, balloons, and a giant chocolate cake. Every few minutes, she asked what Daddy's face would look like when he opened the hotel door. I laughed and told her he would probably be speechless. As I watched her innocent smile and listened to her imagine the perfect family surprise, I convinced myself that every strange feeling I had carried for months was nothing more than ordinary worry. I had no idea that hope was quietly leading us toward the most painful day of our lives. By the time our taxi pulled up outside Daniel's hotel, Lily could barely sit still. She bounced across the polished lobby floor, clutching the birthday card in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. I carried the cupcakes, balloons, and Daniel's wrapped watch, smiling every time she whispered, "He's going to be so surprised." The receptionist smiled politely when I mentioned my husband's name. "Yes, Mr. Carter is still checked in," she said before pointing us toward the elevators. Hearing those words made me feel even more confident that our little surprise would be perfect. The ride to the 12th floor felt strangely slow. Lily pressed the elevator button before the doors had fully opened and hurried down the hallway, stopping outside room 1218. She looked up at me for permission. I nodded, suddenly feeling butterflies for reasons I couldn't explain. She knocked twice. "Daddy," she shouted happily. Surprise. A few seconds later, the door opened. Daniel stood there wearing jeans and a gray t-shirt. The moment he saw us, every trace of color disappeared from his face. His smile never appeared. Instead, his eyes widened with unmistakable panic. "Emily." "Lily, what are you doing here?" Lily laughed and tried to hug him, but he barely moved. Before I could ask why he looked terrified instead of happy, I heard footsteps inside the room. A woman stepped into the doorway. She wore one of Daniel's oversized button-down shirts, and her expression mirrored his shock. Behind her, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. Near the window sat a crib. Children's toys were scattered across the carpet beside grocery bags, folded baby blankets, and framed photographs resting on a table. This didn't look like a hotel room someone had occupied for a few nights. It looked lived in. Lily looked from Daniel to the woman, then quietly asked, "Daddy, who is she?" The silence that followed was so heavy it felt impossible to breathe. In that single moment, I realized we hadn't interrupted a business trip. We had walked into an entirely different life. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Daniel kept looking from me to the woman beside him, as if he could somehow invent an explanation that would make everything disappear. Before he managed to speak, the woman frowned and looked directly at me. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Who are you?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm Daniel's wife." The room went completely silent. The woman's face drained of color just as quickly as Daniel's had. She turned toward him, searching for some sign that I was lying. He opened his mouth twice but couldn't force out a single sentence. Finally, she whispered, "You told me you were divorced." I looked at her carefully. She didn't seem angry at me. She seemed devastated. "My name is Rachel," she said, almost apologetically. "Daniel said his marriage ended 2 years ago. He told me he traveled constantly because of consulting work." Her eyes filled with tears as she glanced toward the crib. "He said we were building a future together." Every word landed like another crack in the life I thought I knew. Rachel quietly picked up her phone and showed me photos. Daniel was holding her toddler at a park. Another picture showed all three of them eating dinner together. The dates stretched back almost a year. Without raising my voice, I opened my own phone. I showed our wedding anniversary pictures, Lily's birthday party, our family vacation from 6 months earlier, and dozens of messages Daniel had sent me during those same Chicago trips. Rachel's shoulders slowly collapsed. "He was telling both of us the same stories," she whispered. Daniel stepped forward, desperately trying to interrupt. "Emily, please let me explain." I calmly raised my hand. "No." For the first time since opening the door, he actually stopped talking. Standing there with another woman comparing calendars, photographs, and text messages, every delayed flight, every extra meeting, every unexplained overnight stay suddenly fit together perfectly. The truth wasn't hiding anymore. It had been traveling back and forth between Indianapolis and Chicago the entire time, wearing the disguise of ordinary business trips. I looked at Rachel one last time before picking up Lily's backpack. She stood frozen beside the crib, tears quietly rolling down her face as the reality settled over her too. Whatever pain I was feeling, I could see she had been living inside the same lie without knowing it. "Thank you for telling me the truth," I said softly. She nodded through her tears. "I'm so sorry." I believed she meant it. Daniel reached toward me, his voice shaking. "Emily, please don't leave like this. We can talk." I looked directly at him for the first time since everything had unraveled. "There isn't anything left to explain." Lily slipped her hand into mine. She didn't fully understand what had happened, but she understood enough to know something was terribly wrong. Without another word, I led her down the hallway, leaving Daniel standing silently in the doorway. The flight home felt completely different from the one that had brought us there. The birthday balloons never left the suitcase. The wrapped watch stayed unopened beneath the seat in front of me. Lily rested her head on my shoulder and quietly asked why Daddy hadn't smiled when he saw us. I kissed her forehead. "Sometimes adults make choices that hurt other people," I said gently. "None of this is because of you." She nodded, then closed her eyes. The moment we arrived home, I stopped thinking about what had happened and started thinking about what came next. I contacted an attorney the following morning, gathered financial records, secured important documents, and changed every password connected to our household accounts. Daniel called constantly. Then came text messages, emails, and long apologies begging for another chance. For the first time in 12 years, I didn't answer. Silence felt stronger than any argument I could have made. It was the first decision that truly belonged to me. The months that followed were nothing like the future I had imagined, yet they slowly became the foundation of a life I was proud to call my own. Instead of spending my energy asking why Daniel had done what he did, I poured it into the people who still deserved my time, especially Lily. My freelance graphic design business, which I had always treated as a side career, suddenly became my main focus. I accepted projects I had once been too hesitant to pursue, worked with new clients across the country, and discovered that confidence grows surprisingly fast when you stop carrying someone else's dishonesty. Lily started meeting with a child counselor who helped her understand that adults sometimes make painful decisions without those choices reflecting a child's worth. We created new routines together. Friday movie nights, Saturday pancake breakfasts, evening walks around our neighborhood. Slowly, the sadness in her eyes appeared less often, replaced by genuine laughter that no longer felt forced. Friends, neighbors, and our families quietly surrounded us with kindness. Nobody tried to tell me how I should feel. They simply showed up when we needed them most. Through mutual acquaintances, I eventually learned that Rachel had ended her relationship with Daniel shortly after we met in that hotel hallway. Once she discovered the full truth, she refused to build a future on deception. His carefully constructed double life collapsed almost as quickly as it had been exposed. For the first time in years, I wasn't measuring my happiness by someone else's promises. I was building it through honest work, peaceful mornings, and the quiet certainty that Lily and I were finally living in a home where trust didn't depend on excuses. That realization gave me a sense of freedom I had never experienced before. Almost a year later, Lily and I found ourselves back in Chicago. This time, we weren't carrying balloons or birthday presents. We were carrying excitement for an entirely different reason. My design firm had selected one of my branding projects for a national award, and the ceremony was being held only a few blocks from the same hotel district where our lives had changed forever. After the event, Lily asked if we could take a walk before heading to the airport. As we passed the familiar streets, she slipped her hand into mine and smiled. "Mom," she said softly, "I'm glad we came here that day." Her words stopped me for a moment.
So was I.
Not because discovering the truth had been easy, but because living a lie would have been far worse. That painful surprise hadn't destroyed our future. It had revealed the chance to build a better one. Looking at Lily, I realized she had grown stronger without becoming bitter, kinder without becoming naive. Watching her smile reminded me that healing isn't about pretending painful chapters never happened. It's about refusing to let them write the rest of your story. As we walked toward the station, I felt something I hadn't expected to find in the city where everything had fallen apart.
Peace.
Sometimes the greatest surprise isn't discovering who someone truly is. It's discovering how strong you become after finally seeing the truth.